Okay, amazing.
This meeting is being recorded.
I'm glad that we've made that clear. This meeting's being recorded. So amazing. Well, I'd say to see you all, but I can't see you all. But I think there's a good number of you coming in to talk about menopause and mental health today, which is absolutely fantastic. My name's Rachel Young. I'm a menopause mind coach and therapist, speaker and trainer. And I've been working in the arena of mental health for over 30 years now. And for the past good number of years, I've been working in the menopause space. So I have Kat with me today, the hormone fairy, the amazing hormone fairy, who is an expert in the menopause space too. Now, the chat is going to be open whilst I'm talking. And Kat is going to be in the chat trying to answer your questions as we go along. If there are numerous questions, don't worry, because we do have the half an hour at the end Q&A time when we can answer hopefully all of the questions that we've missed. But if indeed we do miss any questions, you can always contact us personally, and I'll put our details up at the end so that you can do that. So we're going to be talking about menopause, mental health, and emotional well-being in the workplace and beyond. And I'd like to start this presentation by sharing a very short video with you. Now, this is a video that was sent to me by one of my clients. She contacted me because she was experiencing mental health problems. She was in perimenopause, so the lead up to menopause, and she was really, really struggling. And she said, Rachel, I can't find the words to explain what it is that I'm experiencing. So she sent me this video. And this video, she said, depicted how she felt before she went into menopausal transition, where her brain and her mind was concerned, and how she felt during menopausal transition at this current time. So this is what she sent me.
There's no sound, Rachel.
No sound.
Not now.
Bing, boing, ding, ding, boing, ding, ding, boing, ding, 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 boing, ding, ding, boing, ding.
Okay, so not sure why we don't have the sound there, but you can get an idea from looking at that, what it was that she was trying to say. Now, that was a bit of humor, but actually this is a really, really challenging time psychologically for a number of people during this time of their life. So what I'm going to share with you today, mental health and emotional well-being symptoms of menopause. We're going to be talking about those. We're going to be talking about the impact of menopause on our emotional well-being. And there's some big numbers here. I'll share some statistics with you there. We're going to be talking about the many reasons why you might be feeling the way that you do, if indeed you are in menopausal transition right now. Now, we know that there's a lot of information out there at the moment with regards to menopause on hormones. So, and hormones do absolutely play a part in this. But I'm going to ask you to look at a whole range of other things that can also have an impact upon our mental health and our emotional being during this time of our life. And this might be a stretch for some, I do appreciate that. We're going to be looking at why menopause is actually an awesome time of our lives. Now, as I say, if you are struggling right now, you might not believe me, but I'm going to ask you and invite you to consider that actually this could be an amazing time of your life right now. I'm going to be sharing with you as many techniques, strategies, and practical tips as I can, as time allows, for you to be able to take away with you. And if there's just one thing that you can take away and implement, that's fabulous. To implement for yourself or to share with other people. If there's more, that's even better. And all the way through, we're going to be talking about how to have that menopause conversation, particularly in your workplace, so that you can live your best life through menopausal transition. So just a few points before I get into the good stuff. If you do work in the medical field, you might have an awareness of specific definitions between mental health and emotional well-being. Just so you're aware, I'm going to be using these terms interchangeably. But ultimately, what I'm going to be talking about when I talk about good mental health and emotional well-being is the ability to find pleasure in life, to find that motivation, to be able to find some sort of balance emotionally. And just a quick note on menopause too. Menopause is a term that's used very openly in social media, in the news. And I'm going to be using the term menopause to include perimenopause, so the first stage, the run up to menopause, because we know that menopause is just one day, and to include postmenopause. So when I talk about menopause, I'm going to be talking about that whole transitional time of menopause. So why we can't ignore mental health in menopause? We know we can't ignore mental health anyway. We do know that. But here's some really big numbers. Now, there are approximately 47 million women globally that reach menopause every year. So there are so many of us, me included. But if you look at these statistics from the UK, 1 in 10 women having left work because of symptoms of menopause. Those numbers are way too big. And, you know, within that, we've got women and people who haven't given that reason, or maybe don't know that that's the reason why they've left. We've got those people in there who aren't included, who have maybe gone part-time or taken a demotion to have less stress and pressure. 3 out of 5 working women said this has negatively impacted their work in some way. These are huge numbers. So this is why this is so important that we have these conversations and open it up and develop awareness. And you can see there's some more statistics over there. People saying they're less able to concentrate, experience more stress. And we know the experience of more stress is a real biggie for women in menopausal transition. And that's something that we're going to focus on today. One of the numbers that I'm very interested in is this 25% that felt unable to give the real reason for sick leave. When they were at the point where they felt they needed to take sick leave because of their symptoms, they were full of embarrassment. They felt it was too private. It was surrounded by shame and they felt unsupported. And I would love to see that number come down, all of the numbers. But if we open this up and talk about it and shift that culture around it in the workplace, those numbers will definitely shift. So thinking about depression, just very briefly focusing on depression, because we know that this is a common symptom in menopause, whether that's from a mild low mood to severe depression to suicidal ideation to actually sadly taking one's own life. But if you look at the numbers here, 16-fold increase in depression between the ages of 45 and 52. Well, we know that they're sort of traditionally the ages that individuals go through menopausal transition. Obviously, there's people at the side of that too. 7 times more likely to have suicidal ideation. Now, over the past decade, the suicide rates of older women have been going down wonderfully. But within this bracket of 45 to 54, there's the highest suicide rates. So this really is something that everybody needs to take seriously, to understand and to support and to find the right way through this. And if you see that the picture here, who we have here is Mr. and Mrs. Salmon. Now, Mrs. Salmon very sadly took her own life. She had deep depression. She couldn't find the help that she needed, but her husband is backing a campaign to open this conversation up around menopause amongst men, so that everybody's talking about it, so that nobody has to experience the loss and the pain that he experienced and no doubt continues to. So these symptoms, okay, so not that dreaded symptom list. If we Google menopause, symptoms of menopause, this is what we tend to see. And this is surrounded by fear for many people. I can remember seeing a list similar to this many years ago and saying, oh, no, I don't know how, I'm not going to do it, but I am not going through that. So part of what I want to do is to take the fear away from this and put this into context too. And what I've done is taken this list and then focused it on the mental health, emotional well-being side of things. So yet again, we do have a big list, but to put this into context, when women go through menopausal transition, they might experience 1, 2, maybe 3 of these symptoms. If indeed you are experiencing any of these symptoms and they are anything other than just low or minor, please, please, please reach out and get some support to your GP, or even if you feel you can't talk about it, just talk to one person so that you're sharing how you're feeling. But we do have a whole list here, and I would say it's recommended about 20% of individuals who go through menopausal transition will experience some sort of fairly severe mental health problems. 20% won't even notice. Everyone else in the middle will have some varying degree of symptoms that can come and can go. Some will stick around, some will come, and some will go. So we need to put some sort of context around this. Now, as I say, after having shared the list of doom and fear with you, this is a bit of a stretch for some to understand, but I would like to encourage you or share with you my thoughts about menopause and others' thoughts about menopause, that this is actually an awesome time of our lives, if indeed we can work out ways to enable ourselves to move through this and to flow through this and to manage those symptoms and to ditch some of those symptoms. So if we look at what Oprah says here, so many women I've talked to see menopause as an ending. And this is what I see from women who come to see me in my therapy room. The end of youth, the end of fertility, which for some is exceptionally difficult and fueled with loss. The end of my career, the end of life as I know it, the end of my purpose. It feels very much like a full stop for many people. So we want to talk about this and open it up. And as Oprah adds here, I've discovered this is your moment to reinvent yourself after years of focusing on the needs of everybody else. So there's a lot of change psychologically, physically that we're going through. And we also need to make changes too, so we can negotiate this in the best way possible. So my thoughts about menopausal transition are actually that it's a blessing in disguise and a necessary wake-up call. It is absolutely a time where we need to put ourselves first. And if I try and explain this to you, because for many, if we hit menopause within that 45 to 55 age bracket, it is often a time of recognition of mortality. I know it was for me. So it's a time where you take stock and think, time gone versus time left. What happened in the past? Have I achieved what I set out to achieve? Am I where I choose to be? Am I going to be able to live the rest of my life like this? What do I need for the rest of my life? So it's a moment for taking stock. And I've also observed over the years that what happens is that when you're looking back, all of those traumas that have never been processed, those griefs, those old beliefs that you've been carrying through your life, such as I'm not good enough or I'm a failure, any of those things, they almost sort of gather up and plonk themselves in your lap. And alongside of that, if indeed, I am guilty here, that you haven't necessarily looked after your physical and mental health in the best way possible, that at this point can catch up with you too and plonks itself in your lap. And I think it's as if your mind and your body is saying, do you know what? You've carried all of this around for this long. I'm trying to make changes here. I'm trying to go through menopausal transition, deal with this and sort this out so you can lift that load. And I hope that makes sense to you, because a lot of what I'm going to be talking about you today is about relieving that psychological stress load, that historic stress load, that current stress load, so we can flow through menopause and look into our future with purpose and clarity. As I like to say, this is a time for strutting our stuff. So going back to this list, okay, so what we need to think about are two things I'm going to share with you. So firstly, thinking about, why do I feel this way? And then we're going to move on to thinking about, what can I do about it? So thinking about why you might feel the way that you do, if you are struggling with your emotional well-being during this time, or indeed you know people who are. And as I said, Partly this is due to hormones. So we're going to have a very brief look at that. But there are many, many other reasons why too. So let's have a quick look at those hormones. Now, we know that estrogen is one of those hormones that's responsible for how we're feeling and for what's going on physically and psychologically. But what I do want to say to you is, if you are struggling, you have not gone mad. I hear this so many times from women that come to see me. I feel like I've gone mad. I've lost my mind. I can't process my thoughts. I'm struggling. I can't find clarity. I can't concentrate or think in the way that I used to. But if we look at the brain here, it makes sense why that's the case. The little reddy brown triangles here are your estrogen receptors. Now, we know they're all over our body, but they are also in your brain in clusters. And they're in areas of your brain where they affect your cognition. So as those hormones begin to decline in a haphazard way alongside other hormones too, they can impact upon our ability to think clearly, our ability to find that word. I always say words used to sit on the tip of my tongue. Now they sit on an iceberg somewhere melting away. And I know they're probably not coming back for any time soon, but it's taking the pressure and stress away from them. We know that those estrogen receptors that sit in our brain can have an impact upon anxiety, how we feel, our body temperature, so our regulatory systems, which is why we can get hot flushes and cold moments too. They can impact upon our sexual behavior and more. But what we also have in here, the little black dots, is progesterone. And you can see those receptors are all over our brain as well too. So this helps us to understand a little bit more that we are not going mad. There is actually something going on in our brain where our hormones are concerned. Now, I'm going to be talking quite a lot today, as I've said, about stress and our stress load. So historic stress load and current stress load. Many of us live within that fight, flight state, or very, very close to it. We have so many demands on us, and our brains aren't designed, they've not caught up, they're not designed to manage so much input. So our cortisol levels can be particularly high. Now, progesterone, which was the little black dots in the picture, one of our hormones, one of its properties is as a calming hormone. Now, that calming hormone is declining as we move through menopausal transition. But then if we've got too much cortisol pumping through our body, it's like Pac-Man, gobbling up that much needed progesterone. So this is another reason why we might be feeling the way that we do. We might be struggling to concentrate, focus, feeling more stressed, and indeed feeling anxious. And just one more is lovely testosterone. And yes, we do produce more testosterone than estrogen. I know it's traditionally known as a male hormone. And this declines more steadily, and it is one that's a lot easier to test for. You can have your testosterone levels tested. If your testosterone levels are low, you might find that you're exhausted. You might find that you've got muscle weakness. You might find that your sexual desire is non-existent. And there have been cases of women being diagnosed with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and dementia, when actually it was their testosterone levels that were low. So you were not going mad or crazy. I know there's a lot of information on this slide. So hormones are part of the picture, but these are other things that can influence the symptoms that you're experiencing when we're talking about physical symptoms, but also mental health symptoms, emotional well-being symptoms. These are things that can also influence what you're experiencing and how you're feeling. So when a client comes in to see me, I'll have all these thoughts and ideas just sort of floating around at the back here. Now, you're pleased to know that I'm not going to talk through all of these with you, but just to point a few of these out to you. So if we look over here at the ACE score. So the ACE score is a score that's given based on childhood trauma and neglect. So if there's a higher score, if someone takes the test, if there's a higher score, then there's higher incidence of neglect or trauma in their childhood. Now, we know that there is a positive correlation between childhood trauma and the intensity and duration of menopausal symptoms and mental health symptoms experienced by women in menopausal transition. So we know that what we've experienced in our past can have a huge impact upon what we experience today in menopausal transition. But it doesn't mean that we can't do something about that. We can always do the work to process that trauma. We can never change what happened, but we can change how we feel about it, which releases a lot of that stress load, that historic stress load for the brain, and begins to bring more balance to our mind and body. We might talk about exercise. What does that look like? Are we exercising in the best way and the right way for us at this point in our life? We might talk about physical health. We might talk about mental health history. Now, we know that depression is a fairly common symptom in menopausal transition. But if there is a history of depression, then we can actually focus on that and begin to shift that load as well. We'll certainly look at beliefs. What are your beliefs about women, about the role of women? And don't forget, we're not always talking about women here. We also want to include non-binary people, or people who are transitioning, who may also not necessarily experience menopause per se, but might be experiencing many of the same symptoms. So I know there's a lot of information here. You know, we've got nutrition, thinking about role models, thinking about how open this conversation is in that person's life, thinking about their pelvic health and their pelvic health history. Even what do they think? What are their thoughts? Do they have shame around their body? So all of these things are influences upon our mental health and emotional well-being, and how we experience those symptoms in menopause. So as I say, what we're always looking at, and for you to consider too, we're always looking at reducing our current and historic stress load. Don't forget, we need to bring that cortisol down. We need to find that balance. We need to support our body in whatever way we can. So we're looking at bringing our stress load down, but we're also looking at supporting our mind and our body to better manage our stress load. And what that often means at this point in our lives is that the ways that you previously did things don't work or don't fit anymore. So it's often about finding new ways and changes that you can make to support your mind and your body as best you can through time. So I'm going to invite you to think about your own stress load now, and to consider what your stress load is. Now, we're talking about historic stress load and current stress load, but using these pictures here as maybe some inspiration. If you are in that 45 to 55 category, we are often known as the sandwich generation. So it may be that we've got younger people to take care of. It may be that we're supporting a household responsible for finances, but maybe we've also got people older than us, the older generation, that we're starting to take care of and got responsibilities for. So what is your stress load like? Do you have financial worries? Are you trying to work from home, manage children? Do you have teenagers? I'll tell you something, going through menopausal transition whilst living with a teenager who is going through puberty, I don't know who designed that, but that is wrong. So you might have that going on like me, you know, potential clashes there. You might be caring for older people. You might be responsible for the laundry. You might be a taxi driver doing all the deliveries. You know, you might be caring for someone with additional needs. You might have additional needs yourself, your work responsibilities. You might have a team of people who rely on you, and so on and so forth, on and on it goes. You might be a single parent. You might live alone. You might be struggling with low mood, anxiety, depression, which adds an immense stress load. So I'm going to ask you to consider, what is your stress load right now? And then I'm going to ask you to think about these questions. And by all means, put your answers in the chat here. And Kat can share some of those with me if those answers do pop up. So on a scale of 0 to 10, I'm going to ask you to think about your emotional health. Now, this isn't to make you think, oh my goodness, and to distress you in any way. This is to be able to sort of open up that conversation and think, okay, this is where we are. What can we do about this? So whether you're in menopausal transition or not, this is something that you can engage with if you choose to. So on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being, I feel amazing and I am rocking this. 10 being, I can't cope anymore, it's too much. If indeed you are a 10, please reach out and have that conversation with somebody. So firstly, how heavy is your stress load right now? And give that a number. So as I say, just write it down or think it in your head, or indeed put it in the chat if you choose to. Secondly, what number would feel good and comfortable for you? So what number, if you could choose, would you choose to be instead? And then when you've got those two numbers, I'm going to ask you to notice the difference between those two numbers. Are they really far apart? If they're quite close together, at the good end of the scale, fabulous. But are they really far apart? And if they are, what needs to change for you to be able to move from where you are to your desired number? So we're looking at that gap there. How can we move you towards that number that you desire to be with regards to your emotional health? And as I say, this is something that everybody can do. But if you then consider women or individuals in menopausal transition with regards to this exercise, the historic, current, and perception of future stress load can increase. And the ability to emotionally and physically manage a stress load can be reduced. So in menopausal transition, those numbers are likely to be even further apart. So do we have any numbers there, Kat? Anybody saying where they are with their stress load or what number they would?
We do. The comments are going absolutely mad. So thank you, everyone. We have lots of high numbers, 7s to 9s. We have a 10. And then the low numbers, most women are wanting, a 0, maybe a 3, a 2.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of women commenting. The chat box is going mad, Rachel.
Okay, thank you for sharing. So indeed, if that number is high with your stress load, then, I would say it's imperative that you do something or take some sort of action. And I know that can feel very, very difficult, because quite often we're like, but what do we do? I have to do this, and this. But if you are in menopausal transition, and I know it's difficult to prioritize, but our emotional health has to take priority there somewhere. So we're going to be looking at maybe some things that you can do to be able to support yourself and to close that gap a little bit, even if it's just 1 or 2 numbers to begin with. So let's look at what you can do about it. What can you do to begin to close that gap? And I'm going to share as many things with you as I have time to. So as I say, we're always looking at reducing that current and historic stress load. And we're always looking at supporting our minds and body to better manage that stress load, because we want to take that stress load away from our body and our mind so it can transition. We can support it as much as we can to find that balance and that emotional well-being. Our bodies, when we experience things, when we feel things, they're screaming out to us saying, this feels too much. Can we please do something about it? So what can you do? Now, I'm going to be focusing on just a few of these things, but these are some of the options, just some of the options that you can begin to look at. If indeed you are struggling with your mental health, then please contact a GP, contact a specialist. If you don't feel in the place where you can do that right now, as I say, have a conversation with at least one person to begin with, so those words are then spoken. Think about your lifestyle. Think about your diet, your exercise. Sometimes we can be exercising too much or in the wrong way. We're at this point of our lives. So if you're an individual that likes to do 5 HIIT classes a week, well, our brain can't distinguish between that type of stress and the external and internal stress we're experiencing. So sometimes it's worth considering, okay, I love my HIIT classes, they get those feel-good hormones going, but maybe I'm going to take a couple of Pilates classes as well. And it might be that you need to begin exercising, so building that bone strength that's so needed, getting those endorphins going. That might just be walking or wandering, whatever it is. Start wherever you need to start. I know sleep is an issue, or can be an issue during this time, and we don't have time to focus on that today, but that is a whole huge conversation around sleep. How is your sleep is something to consider. What habits do you have that aren't benefiting your mental health and emotional well-being? I'm going to be focusing for the next, what have we got left? Half an hour, amazing, on those stress loads, on mindset, language, beliefs, culture, and your sense of self, because they're places where we can get pretty quick wins. Boundaries, environments, relationships, HRT, if you choose to take HRT or not, or can't. And there's many alternative therapies too. Hypnosis has been proven to be exceptionally effective, as myself and Kat know, because it's something that we also do. Effective, particularly with hot flushes, but in many areas of emotional well-being and mental health. There's other things such as reflexology, acupuncture, using herbs, all sorts of things that you can begin to look at to support your mind and body during this time. So very briefly, I'm going to ask you to think about your language, or the language that others use around menopause, around women, around menopause or transition. And you can see this quote here. Whenever we view menopause as a medical condition, now the medical world absolutely has its place. It absolutely has its place within the process of menopause. But we need to think about how we're thinking about this, because if it's treated as a disease, women perceive this period of their lives as a sick time when they are patients waiting for recovery. And we want to flip that on its head. Now, we know that not every woman thinks about it that way, but a lot of the language currently is focused that way. So we want to think of this as a time where we want the answers, where we want to take control, where we want to feel empowered, where we want to find our way through. And I know that there are many women that do feel that way and get frustrated that they can't find the answers that they're searching for. And then very briefly looking at culture. Now, this I find fascinating. And there's a reference at the bottom there if you want to look into this a little bit further. There's not masses of research around there, but there's some. So in cultures where older women are perceived to be wise, their age and loss of fertility seen as a sign of status, there are few to no symptoms reported. Wow. What does that say? What does that say about our beliefs and our culture? It says so much, but we have lots to talk about, so we're not hanging around on that. But just something to consider there. The mind, our beliefs, how we think, how we perceive the world, how we perceive that others judge us. So important with regards to our mental health and emotional well-being experiences. So something a little more practical here. Now, breathing, again, we could spend a whole hour talking about breathing, and we're not going to. But as I've said, we tend to live up here with our breath up here, tense, in that busy pace of fight and flight. Our stress cycle is designed to manage a lot of stress, but it's designed to cycle and relax, cycle and relax. And many of us live in that cycle of go. So we don't get that downtime. We don't complete that hormonal process of stress and relax. We get stuck in that cycle. So breathing here is key. Just being aware of your breath and activating that parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is our go. It's like our accelerator. The parasympathetic is our rest and digest. And just by slowing our breath down, we can naturally activate our brain to say it's okay, we're okay, and we're safe. So I suppose what I'm saying to you is remember to breathe and remember to slow that down, bring your shoulders down. Just catch yourself at moments to enable yourself to do that. pacing. Now, this is where I have always been guilty, and I know many, many women are, and men, but in menopausal transition, this is something where we need to make changes. If you live in that push, 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 crash, push, 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 crash cycle, which I did for years, it's like, I can do it, I can keep going, I can keep going. That needs to shift. We need to find a way to move through our days and lives with flow. Of course, there are going to be times of push, but it's got to be more consistent. And once again, I hear people say, but I can't, I'm too busy, I've got too much to do. But ultimately, what you'll find is if you do make this shift, then over time, it'll enable you to have more energy, to have more clarity, to be able to get more things done. So things that you can do at work, you know, taking a break before you need to. I know you can't always say, I need a break. Taking a break before you need to is about creating a consistent pattern, planning things, maybe creating more gaps between things, but planning things so that they can flow. Delegating and ditching. Where can you delegate? You know, so often we think, well, it's easier, it's quicker if I do it. Spend a little bit of time telling or showing somebody else how to do it. Take it off your plate if you can. It's about listening to your body. Your body is always talking to you. What you're feeling, if you could put words to that, what would it say? It's probably telling you to back off, to slow down a little bit. Saying no and putting boundaries in place is key here. Takes practice for many. We need to get used to saying no. Doing pleasurable things. How many times do you ditch pleasurable things because you've got this to do or that to do? And laughing. When is the last time you had a really, really good belly laugh? In fact, stuff it. I'm going to invite you to do it now. Okay, right? When we laugh, we experience so many feel-good hormones. You know, all the stress leaves us and we get into that wonderful time. Particularly, we can laugh with somebody else. And so I'm just going to laugh. I encourage you to join me right now. And you might, as you see me laughing now, you might be saying, oh my goodness, doesn't she look great? That. Take the time to laugh. Notice the difference in how you feel. Even if you were looking at me then thinking, oh my goodness, she's lost it. Great. Make sure you find that time to be able to find that laughter. Now, for those of you born in the 70s, this next video, and Kat, if you could let me know if we can hear the sound here. If not, I'll skip past it. But for those of you who are born in the 70s, maybe the late 60s, will recognise this message from Zamo from Grange Hill. But Kat, if you could tell me if we can hear the sound on this. Have we got the sound on that, Kat? Absolutely brilliant. Okay, let's play again. You don't have to be part of the crowd. Just be who you are and stand up proud. Say no, no. Just say no. Just say no, no. Just say no. Don't you act like a great big star. You can be a hero. Be who you are. Say no, no. Just say no. Just say no, no. Just say no. Don't listen to anyone else. All you gotta do is be yourself. Don't listen to anyone else. All you gotta do is be yourself. Everything inside of you. Have faith in yourself. Your dreams will come true. Just say no, no. Just say no. 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 Anybody recognise that from Grange Hill, or is it just me? I know, a little bit of humour, and it's good for the mind to go back down memory lane. But, I know they were from Grange Hill, but their message is good. We need to learn to say no. And I know that was about drugs, but we're talking about our life at this point in our life, learning to say no. And if indeed you did watch that video, you notice the sign for saying no, because gestures are a big part of our communication. Just say no. So if you are indeed struggling to find the words no, if your colleagues ask you to do something and it's creating too much overwhelm, just give them this. And if they were here, they'll know that you're saying no. So what I want to share with you now is a way that you can begin to think about those limiting beliefs that you might have. Now, you can spend quite a lot of time on this. And this is a really good activity that you can take away and maybe do in your teams, maybe do with people that you know, because you can spend some time on this. So I'm just going to take you through it. This is being recorded, so you can come back and have a look or take a photograph of it as well. But what this does, it encourages you to look at any of those limiting beliefs, stress loads that you have been carrying with you since maybe you were a child. And limiting beliefs can create a huge stress load on our brain. They can impact our mental health and our emotional well-being in quite profound ways. They can stop us from doing what we want to do. They can create doubt. They can push us to be that perfectionist, so we're always stressed, we're always focusing. So one limiting belief that shows up in many, many people and dumps itself in our lap during menopausal transition psychologically is the limiting belief of I'm not good enough. And this can show up in many, many ways. It might show up as you thinking, I'm not keeping up, I'm not clever enough, I'm not thin enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not confident enough, I'm not enough, I have to be the absolute best to prove that I am enough. So this can show up in many, many ways. So I'm going to encourage you now to think about what your limiting belief is. So if you don't have one, amazing. Most of us do. Most of us have quite a few. But think about that for yourself, and by all means put it in the chat if you want to, and go through this process or write it down on paper, or take this away and do this at another time. But within that limiting belief, if say your limiting belief is I'm not good enough in some way, I'd like you to focus on that. And then answer the question, what is that limiting belief telling you? Start that first question with I am. And it's normally I am not confident enough. I am not good enough in some way. And then think about what it tells you about others. So others are. Now, if we have a limiting belief, it tends to tell us lies about other people. So others are not supportive. They're out for themselves. They're not understanding. They're too busy for me. They judge me as past it. They believe that I'm too old to get that promotion. And then think about how that limiting belief skews your view of the world. The world is a place of struggle. The world is unsafe. Now, there might be some truth in this. Sometimes the world can be a place of struggle, but is that the predominant thought that's stopping you from living your best life emotionally and psychologically? And when you've done that, move into the middle section. So this is without that limiting belief, what would be different? So if I could reach in, where's the camera? If I could reach in and everyone chucks their limiting belief into my hand, and I'm going to take those, flip, there's lots, okay? I'm going to chuck them over there. You can have them back if you want to, but I don't think you do. So thinking about how it would be without that limiting belief, how would your thinking process change? How would you step into life differently? How would you feel differently? So without that limiting belief, you might think, I am a person full of ideas. So we're looking at moving from that we're looking at closing the gap between those two numbers we picked out earlier. I am a person full of ideas and wisdom. I am in a transitional time of my life, and this is where I should be. I am of value. I am worth listening to. I am confident. I can say no and be okay with that. Others are mostly kind and want to help if we give them the opportunity. Others are mostly understanding and accepting. We know not everybody is, but opening it up to see that there are people who are that way. And then the world is a place of opportunity, challenge and change. And it's a place where I belong. And that belonging, I hold my hands like this when I say belong, because that sense of belonging and safety is what underpins our emotional well-being and our mental health, which is why it's so important that we have these conversations in the workplace. We have these conversations within our family, with our peers, with our friends, so that when we're in this time of menopausal transition, if we are struggling, then we feel like we're accepted and we belong, and we can talk about our experiences and know that that's okay. So also thinking over on the right hand side here, you've got your limiting belief, you, and you've got your you without your limiting belief. And then you think about, okay, what actions can I take to close this gap, to move those numbers along, to step into that place of I am good enough? Well, part of that could be your thinking, and there's lots of answers you could put here. You know, I didn't choose that limiting belief, and you didn't. You're not born thinking you're not good enough. So it's not something that you chose. It doesn't fit with you and who you are and what you want. It's an old belief, and it's not serving you anymore. So remembering it's old and it's time for it to go. Spend time within that visioning life without that limiting belief. If I could think differently, what would I be thinking, feeling? Show your brain that it's safe to do that. Give yourself the space to process old emotions if you need to. If there's grief that you've not processed, if there's trauma that you've not processed, if there's life experiences that are creating a weight for you, seek maybe some professional support with that. But if not, find space, find somebody who you can talk to and talk that through with. Notice your internal voice once again. Is it coming from a place that's holding you back, that's critical, or is it standing in that place of I'm good enough? Ask for help. Connect with people who build you up. You know those people that make you feel good, that listen, that support you, and you know those people that drain your energy. You have a conversation and you leave and you feel exhausted. Sorry, but you know, I know we have to deal with them sometimes, but you don't have the energy for that right now. This is about you taking care of you. So again, doing things that you love and finding your passion in life. So where are we for time? My goodness. So very, very quickly, because there is something else that I want to share with you. This is just a little bit of fun. Again, enabling you to think about who you are. And in this tree, there are many blob people, 21 blob people. So we'll just do this very quickly. So this again is about you thinking about, where am I? Am I congruent with what I want to experience mental health wise, emotionally? And pick a number that depicts sort of where you are now. And then pick a number of a person, which is the one that you would like to be, which is your true self that really fits with you. Maybe how you felt before you had your menopausal symptoms, or maybe who you aspire to be. And you can absolutely put those in the chat if you want to share your numbers, but just picking 2 numbers. And if indeed you pick the same number twice, fabulous. If that's a good one, you know, this is who I am and this is who I want to be. Absolutely fabulous. But if there's a difference, notice the difference. So I'm going to very quickly, and I realize this print is small because I had to fit it all onto one slide. But this is what Pip, who designed this test, came up with. So just take a moment to find your numbers on there. And this is a bit of fun. So accurate or not accurate, I don't know, but it just starts you thinking again about, actually, I don't have to stay stuck with where I am for ultimate emotional and health, physical health, and mental health. I can begin to step forward towards what it is that I choose, into the belief system that I choose for myself. Let's give you a moment. Okay, and as I say, this is being recorded, so if any of this you want to go back and have a look at, get hold of the recording and you can do so. Okay, so a little bit more about your workplace and how you can help This is particularly helpful, I think, for those menopausal symptoms such as overwhelm, again, stress, foggy brain, struggling to concentrate, struggling to retrieve that information in a way that you once could. This is about giving your menopausal brain a break in your workplace and in other places too. So there's a bit of a culture around thinking, isn't there? That thinking has to happen in the head. Now, we know in menopausal transition that, as I said earlier, whereas before a word could be on the tip of your tongue, sometimes now, like, you lose, I don't know, it's like a tumbleweed goes across your brain sometimes with the cowboy music, and there's like vacancy. And the more stress you put around that, the harder it is to retrieve, and the more the brain goes, no, that's too much. So it's about reducing that pressure around our mind, around our brain, around our feelings, so that we can create more clarity. And this is what Annie Murphy Paul suggested in her book, The Extended Mind, things that we could do to give our mind that break. So this is about taking our thinking and taking that pressure and processing pressure out of our brain and putting it out here instead. So she said, instead of sort of like thinking hard and creating that pressure to clear that brain fog, then think about it more as navigating a different way through our mind to find that information. She spoke about creating an environment around you that is called hoteling. So an environment where you feel safe and you belong. Now, this hot seating, hot desking, I've seen it done in schools, is probably one of the worst things that for women in menopausal transition, you know, where you never have the same desk or you never have the same classroom, because actually our brain needs that sense of safety and that sense of belonging. So bringing in personal things, making our workspace as comfortable as possible in many ways can really, really help the menopausal brain. Connection, we are social beings. So engaging collective thinking instead of that one-to-one thinking where you're battling with your own thoughts and processes. Think about maybe there's teams or groups of people that you can connect with to use connective thinking instead, all of the time, reducing that stress load. And using internal and external resources, using movement alongside our thinking. So just here, maybe thinking about over the past few slides, what's one thing that you could do to change that you feel might benefit you in menopausal transition? And by all means, share that in the chat too. Okay. So there's one other thing that I want to share with you here today, and I'm going to invite you. I'm going to take myself off share screen in a moment so I can go through this with you. So I'm going to invite you to engage in this with me. So this is something that you can use anywhere and any place. And this is a technique that you can use for calming that nervous system down. You know, I spoke earlier about activating the rest and digest, the parasympathetic nervous system in our body. If you're feeling anxious, overwhelmed, stressed, any sort of emotional overwhelm, this is a technique that you can use. Now, because this is going to be recorded, I'm just going to put the instructions up here, but I'm going to close these down in a minute so I can go through this with you. If you want to take a photo of them, feel free, but know that you can access them too via the recording. So I just stop my share briefly. Okay. So what I'm going to do is ask you to go through this with me, and I'll put my screen down a bit so that you can see what I'm doing. And as I say, this is something that you can use at your desk or at work. It can take half an hour or 3 minutes. So what I'm going to ask you to do first of all is to focus on whatever feeling has been causing you difficulty or problems. So this might be anxiety, it might be overwhelm, it might be stress. I don't know what that is, but I'm going to ask you, close your eyes if you want to focus on it, but to become aware of an unwanted feeling that gets too big for you. So you might do this by thinking of the last time that you experienced that powerful feeling. I'm going to ask you to focus on that feeling, and I'm going to ask you to rate it on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 being it's not there at all, 10 being it's a really powerful feeling when it comes along. Just be aware of how you experience that. Everybody's different. Do you experience that in your body, in your mind, around you? And as you focus on that feeling, I'm going to ask you to put your right hand on your left shoulder and your left hand on your right shoulder. Let me bring this down a little bit more. And then I'm going to ask you just gently, but with a little bit of firmness, to stroke. So what we're doing here, we're reconnecting the right and left brain because we're crossing over our arms, but we're also showing our body where its boundary is. So we're nurturing and we're comforting. So whilst you do this, I'm going to ask you to focus on that unwanted feeling, that powerful feeling that you identified earlier. I'm going to ask you to name it. So let's say, for example, it's stress, and it doesn't matter whether you call it Bob, Sarah, Sue, whatever, just give it a name, because we don't want to step away from it. Excuse me, we want to notice it. It's because a feeling is just a feeling, and will always change and will always pass. So stress, stress, stress. And if indeed that action is a little bit too obvious and you want to do this at work discreetly, we can still do this as well. It has the same impact. So rubbing those palms together, slowing that breathing, focusing on that feeling, stress, stress, stress. And do this for however long you've got, really. And when you've done that, the next thing I'm going to ask you to do, still doing this motion, is to take your mind to a place of calm, or a place of safety, or a place of relaxation. So you might bring to mind, I don't know, a time when you're on holiday, a time when you could feel the sand between your toes, maybe a time when you were out enjoying time with your children. I don't know what that might be. Maybe a walk through the woods is your sort of thing. So focus your mind, continuing to do this motion, on a time and a memory that feels good, that feels calm, whilst you continue stroking, calming, letting your mind and your body that you're safe right now. And when you spend some time in that place, however long you've got to do that, often the longer the better, it's a nice place to be. I'm then going to ask you to come back to that old feeling, that feeling that you thought of originally, and just focus back in on your body, keep stroking and nurturing. Stress. And just re-rate that feeling. And what you'll probably find is that number, let's say you started at number 8, has reduced. Even if it's gone from an 8 to a 7, or a 7 to a 6, or maybe even all the way down to a 3, it's just something that you can do in your workplace, whether you've got 5 minutes or 20 minutes, just to bring some balance back to your mind and your body, which creates more balance and more clarity in your mind. And if that number needs to come down even further, you can absolutely repeat that whole process as many times as you need to. So that's something that I wanted to share with you, and I'm aware that we are really, really close to time. So just one more thing that I'm going to ask you to think about before I finish and we go to the Q&A. How to have that conversation in your workplace and beyond. What I would like you to remember, one thing I would really like you to remember, is that if you are here, if you are having this conversation, if you are opening up this conversation, you are a menopause pioneer. Historically, this subject has been shrouded in silence. Oh, it's the challenge. It's been shrouded in shame. It's been something that's not been opened up. So, if you do struggle to talk about it, that's okay, because we are the first generation pretty much to be opening this up and having this conversation. Within your workplace, within your life, buddy up for support. There are 47 million of us globally. You are not alone, even if you feel alone. Create a support group. Get to know your workplace policy. How can you have support? What is it that you can ask for? And if it's not in the policy, talk to somebody about this. Maybe this would benefit everybody within the workplace. People are always open to ideas if you're talking to the right people. I would encourage you to keep the momentum and conversation going around menopause. Time creates cultural change and acceptance. So keep this conversation going, identifying who you can talk to, thinking about what we've thought about today. Have those chats with your peers. What do we need? What adjustments can help you? You know, most women or individuals going through this don't need much in terms of adjustments, but they need a few accommodations sometimes to enable them to go through their menopause transition in the best way for them. Remembering the responsibility goes two ways. So your bosses, employees, organization can put this in place, can put that menopause policy in place, can have your menopause champions in place, but you need to do your bit too and find the words and have that conversation and say, actually, this is what I need. One really good way of keeping this conversation going is to teach others, is to share your experience with others. Our brain loves stories. So if we can share our own story about what we're experiencing, actually that inspires other people and encourages other people to do so too. Always remember to challenge that internal voice. Are you in the place where you want to be, or is it coming from an old script, an old belief? As I say, you are not alone with this, and this absolutely is your time for change. So a nice picture there, but we haven't got time for that because I'm out of time. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening to this. I'm hoping you can stay around for the next half an hour for the Q&A time. Kat's going to jump on now, and I think the chat's been particularly busy. If you do want to contact us. These are my details and these are Kat's details. If there's anything burning that you don't get answered today, please do get in touch. So question time. Let me just stop that share. So Kat, I don't know how many people we have in the room, whether this is best done through the chat or whether people can unmute.
This has been extremely busy. This is the chat box. It has been crazy. And I just want to say thank you to all the women that have shared and been so vulnerable sharing. And as always, remember, you've heard lots of women's stories in the chat box, so please keep that confidential. So lots has been happening, Rachel. So I don't know the best way. We've had a few women have had hysterectomies in their late 30s and have been struggling.
Yeah.
Questions about HRT, and many women have gone on HRT finding that useful. Questions about testosterone, sleep. Women have been talking about exercise. Some ladies have tried Chinese medicine, which is amazing. Mindfulness and confidence. The biggest thing that popped up is most women, I would say, felt confident.
Kat, can you move towards your microphone a little bit more because you're dipping in and out? We want to hear everything you're saying.
Fabulous, thank you.
Okay.
Most women, I would say, in the chat box were struggling with confidence, feeling invisible, low self-esteem, you know, maybe not having a purpose of life. So I think that's something. But if anyone's got any questions, probably best if you pop it in the chat box and then either of us can answer, Rachel.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, well, let me open up the chat box so I can see. Oh my goodness, it has been busy. Okay, where am I going? Down to the bottom here. Okay, Kat, Chinese medicine, any ideas on that one? I know that's not, I know you know a little bit about this, don't you? I know it's not our area of expertise. So anything that you know about Chinese medicine that you can share?
Chinese medicine is an interesting one. I have studied it a little bit, but it's not my speciality. I tend to be more homeopathy and herbal medicine. Herbs are very similar to the Chinese medicine. So there are some really useful things you can do, especially for the ladies. There was quite a few ladies with anxiety type symptoms. So there are some brands of herbal remedies which work similar to Chinese, which one of the best brands, I can probably hold it up to my camera, is, if you can see, hold on.
Go back a little bit, forward a little, hold on.
Oh, we'll find it in a minute. Okay, well, I won't. I'll share it in the chat box. The company is called A Vogel, so letter A and then VOGEL. I will pop it in the chat box.
I'll put it
in.
They
have some amazing herbal remedies. One of them is Avena sativa, which is amazing for helping with anxiety and mild stress. So that could help with your confidence. When it comes to Chinese medicine, you have to go and see a Chinese medicine practitioner. They will make up a blend of herbs that you have to cook. I'm going to be honest with you. I have tried it for various different things with my children over the years and myself. It will stink out your kitchen. You will need an old pan because it will, mark your pan, and it doesn't taste great. But in some cultures, like we quite often discuss, Rachel and myself, in some cultures, like often in Japan and China, they do not have as many symptoms as we do in Europe. So Chinese medicine and herbal remedies are definitely something you can do. When it comes to the herbal remedies, if you're on medications such as antidepressants or heart medications, it's really vital that you check the label. So hope that's answered that one.
Thank you.
Kat, can I come in there? I was the one who shared that. It's Liz.
Yes, yeah, please share your story. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, well, I've seen it. I have also have a heart condition, interestingly enough, and it kind of started in perimenopause, around kind of 44, 45, and it's microvascular angina, which have actually linked to low estrogen levels, as estrogen levels are declining. It's where I've got no kind of main artery disease, but my arteries cramp, and it can be linked to that because I had a nephrectomy when I was quite young. So that's kind of where the journey started. And I struggled to get on any kind of medication that helped with the symptoms. And at the time, I was seeing a acupuncturist who went to then complete a course in herbal medication at the Chinese College of Acupuncture in York. And that's kind of where my journey began, really, with that. And we're talking 5 or 6 years ago now. But it helped with nearly every single symptom I've had. With the menopause, not just the hot flushes, but I can remember going once and I was so low in mood, and it was a completely different. It wasn't. I was just feeling low. I was completely flat, and just could not pick up. And I thought, this is really strange. It feels hormonal. And then within a couple of days, I was just feeling so much better. The other thing that was alongside that is auricular acupuncture. I don't know if you've heard of that. Which has really helped. So anybody out there who's really struggling, I can recommend that, absolutely. Yeah, and I still take them now, and she tweaks them, and she's reputable acupuncture. She's got a doctorate in acupuncture. So yeah, I mean that's the important thing for me. It's making sure that it's a reputable practitioner that you do go to see. So yeah, that's my story. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Another, Rachel, sorry, Liz, thanks for sharing that, because that's something, post-menopause, once the period stops, as women, we are more at risk of heart disease due to our arteries becoming stiffer. The estrogen actually is protective for our heart muscles and our artery walls. So Chinese medicine, crataegus, is another remedy that's really useful for the heart.
Fabulous. And thank you for sharing that, because that's the message that we want to get out there. No matter what you're experiencing, sometimes it takes a bit of time, but things can be different. So it's wonderful to hear that you've found some solutions and answers there that work for you. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, Kat, the next question that came along, I don't know how many of these we're going to get through, but this is a big old question. Why isn't training on menopause compulsory for GPs? Well, we hope with all of this that is changing. Why? Well, women's roles, historic, you could put all sorts of reasons around that. And it wasn't, it was optional. There is a big push for GPs now to become qualified, to become trained in working with women and individuals in menopausal transition. So you're finding more and more GPs are now taking on board and actually being pressured in some cases to do that. I'm hearing more and more in the community of women, and I'm sure Kat's the same. It used to be pretty much every story was, I was misheard, I wasn't understood, I wasn't listening to, and we still hear that way too much, or you're too young, but we are hearing more and more, actually, I saw a GP today who knew what they were talking about and who understood. And we still are a little bit great. It shouldn't be that we're surprised to hear that, but actually things are beginning to change. So the why, I could probably talk about that for a long time. I won't, but things are beginning to shift. And indeed, if indeed you go to your GP and you don't get the support that you need, ask for a second opinion, go to a different GP, go to your nurse practitioner. Sometimes you have to be, pretty resilient where this is concerned, and which can be hard when we're struggling with our mental health and our emotional well-being. But sometimes, if you can't get an advocate, get one of your mates, that mate that just will say it, get that mate to push for you instead. So thank you, Lynn, for your question. Okay, so Gina is the next question. I had gone through menopause by the time I was 30. GPs were unwilling to help or listen, not surprised. Early menopause. I am now 48 and I am still struggling. Is it too late to get support? No, not too late. You're still young. Kat, do you want to add to that one at all?
Yes, I've actually had quite a few women. I do hormone testing, so I've done quite a lot of hormone testing with women who have gone through early menopause. One of the biggest things, I'd be interested to know if you were offered HRT, because whether you want it or not, depending on your health situation as well, whether you've got cancers in the family, but HRT can be really beneficial, especially in the first 5 years after going through menopause, for the younger women in particular. But so HRT maybe is an option for you, or alternatively, diet, mindset work, lifestyle. There is so much you can do. You shouldn't suffer. That's my biggest thing. And I know Rachel was on this as well. Menopause doesn't have to be miserable. Yes, it can be debilitating for some, but there is so much you can do if you're willing. You have to be willing and wanting to make those changes.
Absolutely. So Gina, you're only 48, find what fits with you. Keep seeking things. Awareness is growing all of the time. As I say, if it is HRT that you want and you don't get the answers, go and ask somewhere else. But think about the alternative therapies as well. Think about your diet, as Kat says, exercise, herbs, whatever fits with you. And I think, sometimes it can feel very overwhelming, where you could try this and this and this and this and this, but actually if you think about it as like a jigsaw puzzle, it actually gives us many options and choices. What am I going to choose that might work for me? Well, that didn't really fit with me. What can I choose now to have a look at, see if that makes a difference for me? And it's normally a combination of things that'll move you forward. So Gina, you are young. You find your way. Okay, so Fiona, so this will be one for you, Kat, because this is about sage. Can I have sage with breast cancer hormone meds? I know there's contraindications with some herbs and things, aren't there? So
yes, you have to be really careful. Sage tends to be one that's okay. It's the ones so sage is quite useful for balancing, especially hot flashes. It can be really useful for that. The ones that you have to be careful with when it comes to herbal remedies are the ones that will be changing your hormone levels, such as like black cohosh. And I know one of the other ladies mentioned that. So black cohosh is one that you need to be really careful of. The other one is St. John's wort, is one to be really aware of. If you are on medication and you are seeing an oncologist, again, it's really important that you speak to either your GP or your oncologist. Many oncologists don't even like you taking supplements, so it tends to be quite specific, but always check the labels is the biggest one. But for most women, sage is okay.
Okay, so we've got another question here about a little pill. So I don't know what this is, Kat. Maybe you know. I'll read you the question. This is from Kay Bowes. I hope I pronounced that right. My mum used homeopathy and never needed anything else, but her practitioner is no longer with us, and we never discovered what it was he used. This is curious. Little pills she held under her tongue. Any ideas what would help? You got it. Okay. We can't see that because I think you've got a blur on. But what?
I have a blur. I put it in front of my head.
Oh, yes.
There you go. So, Kay, I don't know your full name, but this is how I became a homeopath. My mum went through menopause at 42. She thought she was going crazy. No one told her what was going on, because in those days, they didn't talk about hormones. So she went to see a homeopath who gave her little white pills. And she took little white pills, put them under her tongue, didn't know what they were, and she started to improve. The other thing is you can get it in a liquid form, which is droplets that you put into your mouth. So you can put them under your tongue to dissolve or in your mouth. And there are various different remedies. One of the biggest ones that most women take in menopause is called sepia. So it's that whole, that picture you shared, Rachel, of the weight of the world on your shoulders. You've got the kids, the dog, the work, the stress. Sepia is very much that woman that is just overwhelmed with everything. Everything is a burden, the weight of the world on her shoulders. So sepia is great for that. It's also really useful for problems with your uterus, maybe a prolapse. You've got one called simisafuga, which I don't know if anyone remembers the Flumps when they were little, watching the Flumps on telly. The little poodle or this little, they used to walk around. One of them walked around with a big grey cloud above his head. That is simisafuga. If you're walking around with that big cloud over your head, then simisafuga. Crying all the time, pulsatilla. Pulsatilla is like a cuddle in a little white pill. That's amazing for that. And then for anxiety type stuff, you've got aconite, gelsemium. You can get some online. I'm a qualified homeopath. This is how I got into it when I had children and needed help outside of the medical profession. But there is lots. So feel free to message me if you need. I've got an ebook that you can have on homeopathic remedies. But there's lots you can do. Completely natural, completely easy. You can buy them online, but you can also find a registered qualified homeopath.
So there we have the mystery of the little white pill solved. Thank you.
Hi, Kat. Sorry, it's Gersh. There's just a couple of mentions in the chat box just for those names that you've just reeled through. Is that possible to just note down in an email, and I can send it out with the kind of wrap-up email I send next week with some of the suggested
absolutely
homeopathic stuff? That'd be brilliant. Thanks so much.
Fabulous. Thank you. So I see Kat's put Vogel for herbal remedies in there. Avena sativa is wonderful for anxiety and stress. So that information's in there. Denise says, also, can I say that if you have had breast cancer sensitive to estrogen or ovarian cancer, please check before taking any herbal remedies. So important. Absolutely. Thank you, Denise. Yes, as some such as black cohosh are not advised. Yeah, really good point. And to emphasize that point is very important. And if you, as Kat says, go to see a registered practitioner if you do indeed intend on taking any of these types of remedies, and they will guide you and support you as to what best you can need, and as to any contraindications there too. Right, so do we have, oh, there's lots more messages down here. Okay, Helen Annam. When I finally plucked up the courage to see the GP, they spent 10 minutes trying to convince me to go on antidepressants. Then when I said I wanted to try HRT, they just gave me links to read for myself. Ouch. Given my lack of confidence, it took an age to be brave enough to make the appointment. So I found the experience very unreassuring. Yeah. They need to be more understanding and educated. Helen, I'm so sorry to hear this, and sadly your experience is not unusual. What I would say, where antidepressants are concerned, if you have a history of depression or a history of anxiety, then sometimes antidepressants will be the way forward. If you don't, if your depression is menopausal depression, then there's very little proof that antidepressants work for that. It's a very different nature and a very different creature. So, well done for finding the confidence to go back. And I know your experience wasn't very good at all. I would say don't give up. If you're struggling, make an appointment with somebody else, maybe a nurse practitioner. And if there's somebody who can advocate for you, that can go with you, maybe speak on your behalf if you're not feeling confident to do that, because the right people are out there. If it's HRT that you want, sometimes you need to be quite assertive with that, and it shouldn't be that way, but it is that way. But please keep going and find somebody maybe that will support you with that, and find the right person, because once you do, it's a very different experience. Okay, thank you for
Yeah,
sharing.
I think just adding on to that one, Rachel, is for anyone, you can ask your surgery if they have a specialist. Quite often it's a nurse specialises in menopause or has done some training. Go with a list of your symptoms. So write everything down, a big list of your symptoms, because then they can probably see what is more hormonal. And as Rachel said, ask for what you want.
Yes, and there are forms that you can find if you Google visiting GP with menopause symptom forms or something like that. There are forms you can download that will help you to prepare for your visit to the GP. So if you struggle to have that conversation, you can just hand them the form and say, this is what I've been experiencing. So these forms tend to have a list of symptoms, and they might have the option of how often you experience them, for how long, how intense they are. So you can just fill that in and go to your GP and say, okay, this is what's happening for me. Find out who the specialist is or the one that's trained. This is what's happening for me. I would like to consider HRT and have some advice. So go prepared as well. Okay, next question. I don't think we're going to get through all of these today. Thank you, Rachel. So helpful and so good to know you are not alone. You are not alone. 47 million of us globally. And within your organization or wherever you work, you know, if you see a woman who's between the ages of 45 and 55 or thereabouts, she may well be having, you know, some symptoms and issues of her own, and younger and older than that too. So if you ever do feel alone, please connect in whatever way that you can. I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 28. Goodness, sorry to hear that. I've struggled to get support from my GP with so many symptoms and what I can take to help. So exhausted. Happy to say that the information received has given me hope. I'm glad it's given you some hope. It's so frustrating to hear that people can't always get the support that they need, that they're still struggling. And, you know, it sounds like you've been through it as well, physically and emotionally. But yes, there is always a way forward, even if initially that is just finding someone to talk with so that you get that emotional support. Maybe trying an alternative therapy, you know, treating yourself to that time of connection, maybe treating yourself to some reflexology or an acupuncture treatment, and just gently finding out what it is that works for you, because it would be fabulous for you to be able to get some of that energy back too. Okay, Sarah, look, how do you know which hormones you may be low in if a blood test only shows a snapshot and they're altering all the time? This is Kat's domain. This is what she does.
This is me, hormone testing. To be honest, hormone testing, blood tests don't really work until you get close to menopause. So the perimenopause, when you're still getting regular periods, you tend not to get very good results from a blood test. A blood test does need to be taken on a specific day of the month if you are still having regular periods. When it comes to hormones, it is just a snapshot and they will alter over time. They tend to alter quite slowly. It tends to be progesterone is the hormone that drops first. That tends to give the anxiety type symptoms, and also the excess estrogen. So maybe heavy bleeds, bloating, crying for no reason. That tends to be one of the symptoms. And then cortisol, stress, as we've banged on about today. Rachel's been talking about stress. Cortisol plays a major role, and it's something I do hormone tests, I do blood tests, but I also use Dutch test, which is a urine and a saliva test, which shows a better breakdown of what's causing what symptoms. But it's working out, because some symptoms will be testosterone, some will be cortisol, and some will be progesterone and estrogen. So it's working it all out. Happy to help if you need to understand that a little bit more.
Thank you, Kat. Okay, so thank you, Sarah, Chris. My GP practice is great. Whoop, whoop. They have a meno specialist nurse. Wow, who is lovely. Where is your GP practice? We're going to send everybody there. Really good to hear. And as I say, we are starting to hear this more and more. So thank you for sharing the hope there, Chris. Okay, Linda, Is there much difference between bioidentical HRT versus traditional patches, tabs, gels? The difference, one of the main difference that we have is that the HRT that you will get from your GP has been tested and passed. So it's deemed as safe. Other types of HRT you tend to get from private, if you go privately, from private practitioners, and they tend to sort of create their I was going to say mixture. I've lost a word here, Kat. Oh, it's over there on an iceberg. It's not coming back, so I'll just
Prescription is tailored.
Thank you. This is why we work in pairs at this point in our life. So more to a women's needs. Now, that isn't necessarily an improved combination, but a lot of people will still take it and still swear by it. So it's a matter of choice, really. Is there anything you want to add there, Kat?
Yes, so yeah, body identical HRT is regulated, hence why the NHS has, as Rachel said, it's been tested more. As for the different types, the gels and the patches tend to bypass the, they go straight to the liver. So they tend to bypass some of the organs, whereas the pill versions, the old versions, used to be more linked with the high blood pressure, heart issues, cancers, whereas the new ones, the patches, the gels, because they're bypassing, going straight to the liver, getting detoxed quicker, they tend to be safer. That is the latest research that's coming out on those.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's often a matter of choice, isn't it? Many women prefer the gel, but then you have to put that on daily, and then other women prefer just to stick a patch on that they change maybe once a week. Some women, the patches are great, others, they for some reason they keep slipping off. So it's just finding your own way forward, really, what best fits with you. So thank you for that question. Some great questions here, Kat. Okay, where are we? Lynn. I only got onto HRT when I finally got an appointment with an up-to-speed postgraduate GP. Oh, Lynn, a postgraduate up to speed? Things are changing. That's really, really good to hear. That is really good to hear. So maybe that training, maybe they took it as an option, or maybe it's being brought in. Maybe it's now compulsory and we don't know, Kat. We'll have to find out if that has indeed changed. That's something to celebrate if it has. Thank you, Lynn, for sharing the hope. Okay, George, is there still a shortage for HRT meds? I had to start taking the one I'm on mainly because the two that were prescribed before were not available. Oh my goodness, this caused such distress for many, many women. That our communities, I know, went a little bit bonkers, didn't they, with fear, because there's a lot of women who had been struggling, who had finally found their way with their patches or their gels, particularly their gel, only to find that they couldn't get it anymore. It caused a huge amount of anxiety. I think most women were able to find an alternative, and it sounds like you were prescribed an alternative. My understanding is that the supplies are now out there again. The promise was that the supplies would be up and out there again by July. We are now find ourselves in October, and I am hearing less and less that women are struggling to get supply. So as far as I'm aware, that the supply is flowing again. I'm not saying it's glitchless, and I'm not saying it's flowing magnificently, but it's certainly in a better position than it was. Have you heard any different, Kat, recently about supplies?
There still seems to be an issue with some. I think I can't remember the name of it. Estrogel. It's the one that comes in the gel that comes in a nice white bottle with a sort of aqua green on it. That
Right.
tends to be the one that people are struggling to get hold of. Some clinics are getting it back in now, and what was going to say, brain fog's kicking in now. Some women last year, they were prescribed 12 months worth, and that was another reason why there was a shortage. Some women were given 12 months supply. I have women that were given that supply and never used it, which is very sad, and they can't give it back, but they can't give it out to anyone. So it seems to be getting better, but it's just one or two brands.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, well, there was a bit of a black market started, wasn't it? People selling their HRT, selling their gel for ridiculous amounts of money, you know, using women's fear. It all went a little bit wrong there, didn't it? So getting back on track, absolutely, with that. So Lindsay, I have to go now. Oh, thank you for joining us, Lindsay. You've probably gone by now by the time we got to your question. This will all be recorded, so you can absolutely have a look at this. What diet would you recommend? Well, that is probably a lot of talking in its place. So to finish off, Kat, because that's quite a big subject. So we've come to the end of time, but Kat, could you just give us, no pressure here, and maybe an ideal breakfast, lunch, and tea?
So very quickly, when it comes to diet, you need to reduce the crap. So all the things that you love. So the carbs, you need to reduce the carbs. Swap your carbs to things like brown rice, quinoa. Sweet potatoes are amazing, a really good source of phytoestrogens. So cutting out the carbs, reducing the refined sugar, so staying away from the cakes, the biscuits, all the nice things. Alcohol is not our friend. Yes, it's like, I'm a big Prosecco person, but I can't drink as much as I used to. I know Rachel's similar. So alcohol, because our liver starts to take over, it's detoxing our estrogens, plus it has to do so many other functions. So alcohol is no longer our friend. So yeah, cutting out all of that, the processed food and the sugars. Ideally, breakfast, you want to have protein with every single meal. Please don't skip breakfast, because we need to balance our blood sugar. That is the key, balancing blood sugar. So protein with every single meal, breakfast, and maybe Greek yogurt with some berries, adding some flax seeds. They're great for the hot flashes. Lunch, again, protein. So maybe some salmon, chickpeas, bit of chicken, your brown rice, quinoa, loads of vegetables, eat the rainbow. And the same with dinner as well. It really is going back to basics. So protein, don't be scared of fats. Olive oil is good. Avocados are great. Coconut oil. So fats, fiber, your phytoestrogens. So broccoli is great, detoxing that estrogen again. Nuts and seeds. That's a quick overall. It's a bit boring, to be honest. You have to cut out the rubbish and eat the good stuff. Just only go in the first couple of aisles of the supermarket. That will help you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that tip, and for that very, very brief summary of a subject that could take hours to talk about. So well done. And again, it's all about getting that balance, isn't it? Treating our body well, treating our mind well, and finding that balance and speaking out and having this conversation. So sadly, we haven't managed to get through all of the questions, but thank you so much, everybody, for joining us and for keeping Kat really busy in the chat there too.
Thanks, Rachel, and thank you everybody for joining. I thoroughly enjoyed that session, and some of the questions that came through there are brilliant. But yes, thank you once again to Rachel and to Kat, and we'll see you, hopefully all of you, again on the throughout the week, throughout all the sessions. So good luck, and we'll see you all soon. Take care. Bye bye.
You have a fabulous week.